My paranoid wife took our teenage son from his school program because she believes Bluetooth is mutating his cells. We have been married for over a decade. We met at an alternative wellness retreat, bonded over clean living, and raised our son with strict holistic principles. Natural health has always been a shared priority, but my wife gradually pushed it into a realm of pure obsession that I never signed up for. The escalation was gradual. When our boy was 6, she banned all battery-operated toys, claiming the synthetic materials and microcurrents were disrupting his natural energy field. I thought it was absurd, but I let it slide. When he was 8, she pulled him out of a weekend camping trip with his scout troop because the campsite was within a few miles of a cell tower. I fought her, but she broke down weeping, accusing me of compromising his developing brain, so I surrendered. By the time he was 10, she forbade him from visiting his closest friend because that family used commercial laundry detergent and kept their Wi-Fi router on overnight. That argument dragged on for days. I eventually apologized just to stop the exhausting silent treatment. I should never have folded. Our son is a teenager now, and his absolute lifeline is robotics. He has been part of a competitive engineering league for a couple of years, and his mentor constantly praises his natural talent for coding. He spends hours voluntarily researching mechanical design. He talks excitedly about university programs and building autonomous rovers. It is the only space where I see him truly light up. Last month, my wife announced he was done with the tech lab. I demanded a reason. She claimed she had been reading underground forums and concluded that the continuous exposure to soldering fumes, Bluetooth signals, and raw circuit boards was mutating his cellular structure. I told her she was completely losing her grip on reality. I reminded her he is just a kid building motorized cars, not working inside a nuclear reactor. She coldly replied that the modern world is designed to make us sick, and she wouldn't let him be a victim. I expressly forbade her from interfering, so she circumvented me completely. She bypassed the school entirely and submitted a heavily exaggerated, legally binding medical directive signed by her fringe holistic practitioner, claiming our son suffered from severe electromagnetic hypersensitivity. I found out when I received an automated district email confirming his permanent removal from the science wing, followed by a devastating text from my boy showing his unfinished project thrown into a cardboard box. I confronted her the second I got home. She was calmly chopping vegetables in the kitchen, utterly unbothered. She stated she was doing what was biologically necessary to save him. She called me a weak father, brainwashed by convenience, and insisted she was the only one brave enough to intervene. I yelled that this was never about wellness, but about her pathological need to control his environment. For the next week, the house was a morgue. My son stopped speaking. He barely touched his meals. When I sat on the edge of his bed to apologize, he stared blankly at the wall and muttered that there was no point trying because mom would just destroy it anyway. Seeing him that defeated shattered me. I marched downstairs and told my wife I was driving to the district superintendent in the morning to revoke her fraudulent medical paperwork. She stopped wiping the counter, looked me dead in the eye, and told me that if I did, she would immediately file for emergency custody. She threatened to use her network of pseudo-doctors to testify under oath that I was actively endangering a vulnerable child by exposing him to harmful radiation. She said her family had already agreed to fund her legal battle, and she would move him to an off-grid community where I would never see him again. I was completely paralyzed. Yesterday, my son quietly asked if I thought he could ever finish his rover. I lied and said I was figuring it out. He just nodded and retreated back into his dark room. I am out of time. I know she genuinely believes she is saving his life, but I am watching my boy's spirit die in real time. I have to choose between going to war in family court and risking losing him entirely, or quietly watching him turn into a hollow shell of himself. I spent the rest of last night sitting on the back porch, staring at the small, detached tool shed at the end of our yard. The structure is mostly filled with half-empty paint cans, old lawnmowers, and gardening tools my wife bought during her brief phase of trying to grow heirloom tomatoes. It does not have heating. It does not have proper insulation, but it has 2 electrical outlets, a concrete floor, and a door that locked from the inside. At 3 a.m., while the house was perfectly dark, I went out there with a flashlight. I cleared off a dusty workbench, pushing aside rusty shears and old potting soil. My heart was thumping against my ribs like I was committing a felony in my own backyard. I found an old power strip in a drawer, plugged it in, and saw the little red surge light snap to life. The air smelled like damp earth and motor oil. It was freezing, but it was private. When the sun came up, I didn't go to the superintendent's office. The threat of her family's money and those fake medical experts was too real. Her parents have a massive real estate portfolio in Oregon. They have 3 different trusts set up for her, and they've always looked at me like I was just a mid-level accountant who happened to marry into their bloodline. If she called them and said I was giving our son neurological damage, her father would have a top-tier firm on retainer before lunchtime. They would bleed me dry in 3 weeks. Instead, I waited until my wife left for her weekly organic cooperative meeting at 9:30 a.m. The garage door hadn't even finished closing before I went straight to Leo's room. He was sitting on his bed, wearing a heavy linen shirt his mother bought him from a specialty supplier who claims synthetic fibers disrupt lymphatic drainage. He was just spinning a single plastic wheel from an old Lego kit between his thumb and forefinger. He didn't look up when I opened the door. "Get your jacket," I said, keeping my voice down even though we were alone. "We're going to the hardware store. Mom said I can't leave the house today because the neighborhood is upgrading the 5G node," he said. His voice was flat, totally devoid of the typical teenage attitude. It was worse than attitude. attitude. It was total compliance. Your mom isn't here, I told him, and we aren't going to look at cell towers. We're getting your stuff. We drove to the high school in total silence. I parked in the back lot, near the loading dock where the maintenance trucks sit. I knew the robotics coach, Mr. Harrison, usually spent his prep period in the lab cleaning up after the morning classes. When we walked into the side entrance, Leo kept his head down, pulling his collar up like he was terrified someone from the administration would spot him and report back to his mother. Mr. Harrison was at his desk, sorting through a bin of copper resistors. When he saw Leo, his face softened, but it was that look of intense pity that makes your stomach turn. He knew about the medical directive. The school board had forced him to sign off on removing Leo from the roster to avoid a lawsuit from my Leo, Mr. Harrison said, standing up. Good to see you, buddy. We came for the box, I said. I didn't want to make small talk. I felt like a thief. Mr. Harrison reached under his desk and pulled out a heavy plastic tote. Through the translucent blue plastic, I could see the aluminum chassis of Leo's rover. The wiring looked like a bird's nest. It had been yanked out of the main microcontroller board in a hurry when my wife came to collect his things. Leo looked at it, and for a split second, his jaw tightened. I managed to keep the custom servo motors in there, Harrison said softly, looking at me. The district wanted me to log them back into the general inventory, but I told them they were part of a specialized grant. Take them. He earned them. Thank you, I said. I grabbed the box before Leo could reach for it. If he carried it, he'd feel the weight of it, and right now, I needed him to just move fast. We loaded the tote into the trunk of my sedan. On the drive back, the plastic box shifted against the spare tire iron, making a sharp clinking sound every time I hit a pothole. Leo stared out the passenger window, watching the suburban houses roll by. Where are we putting it? He asked as we turned onto our street. She checks my closet. She checks under the bed. She used that meter last week to see if I had a hidden screen in my room. He was talking about the acoustical analyzer she bought online for $400. She spends hours walking around the drywall, holding it up like a Geiger counter, listening for the faint hum of hidden transformers. The shed, I said. She doesn't go in there. The spiders scare her, and she thinks the old creosote on the timber gives off toxic VOCs. We carried the box through the side gate, staying close to the cedar fence so the neighbors wouldn't see us hauling electronics into the backyard. We set it down on the cleared workbench. Leo immediately went to work, his fingers moving over the aluminum frame with a speed that proved he'd been thinking about it every hour he'd been trapped in his bedroom. The power distribution board is cracked, he muttered, pointing a small finger at a green square of fiberglass. When she grabbed it from my locker, she must have dropped the chassis. Can you fix it? I need a soldering iron. And lead-free solder. Otherwise the smoke will... He stopped himself, looking toward the small window that faced the main house. He'd been conditioned to think about the fumes, the toxicity, the hidden dangers. I'll buy the iron, I said, and we'll keep the shed door cracked when you use it. We have 2 hours before she gets back from the market. For the next 90 minutes, I watched my son become a human being again. He didn't smile. He's not that kind of kid, but the blank look left his eyes. He used an old set of pliers to straighten the aluminum bracket. He blew the dust out of the small gears. He was focused. But the reality of what we were doing started sinking in around noon. We were running a clandestine workshop in a rotting shed because my wife had decoupled from the modern world, and I was too terrified of her legal threats to stand up to her in daylight. Every car that drove down our cul-de-sac made me jump. Every time a crow landed on the tin roof of the shed, my hand moved toward the door handle. At 12:15 p.m., we heard the distinct gravelly crunch of her SUV pulling into the driveway. Pack it up, I whispered. Leo didn't argue. He shoved the chassis back into the blue tote, threw an old canvas tarp over it, and piled 3 empty plastic flower pots on top. We stepped out of the shed just as her car door slammed shut out front. When we walked through the back door into the kitchen, she was already there, unloading brown paper bags full of unpasteurized goat's milk and raw root vegetables. She looked at the two of us, her eyes instantly dropping to Leo's hands, looking for grease, charcoal, or anything that didn't belong in her pristine environment. Where were you? She asked. Her voice wasn't angry. It was that low, rhythmic tone she uses when she thinks she's the only sane person in a hospital ward. We went for a walk, I said. Leo needed some fresh air. You said yourself the air quality inside has been low because of the humidity. She stared at me for 3 long seconds. Her eyes are a very pale blue, and since she stopped wearing any makeup or using commercial skin products, her face has taken on this dark, weather-beaten intensity. She looked past me toward the yard. The back gate was unlatched, she said, setting a jar of fermentation starter on the island. You know how I feel about the neighborhood dogs coming in. They carry topical flea treatments on their fur. It sheds into the grass. I'll lock it, I said. Leo moved past her without a word, heading straight for the stairs. She watched him go, her brow furrowing slightly as she noticed the slight bounce back in his step. She knows him too well. She knows that a week of total isolation shouldn't end with him looking like he has a purpose again. She turned back to me, her fingers resting on the edge of the marble counter. He seems different today. Did you take him near the library? No, I lied. We stayed on the trail by the creek. Because the library installed those new touchscreen kiosks at the entrance, she continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. I had a friend from the collective send me the specification. They use a localized microwave frequency to register the finger placement without physical contact. It's devastating for the thyroid, especially for boys his age. We weren't at the library, Sarah, I said, my voice tighter than I wanted it to be. She nodded slowly, but she didn't look convinced. She picked up a bunch of organic kale and began rinsing it under the filtered tap, her back turned to me. My father called this morning, she said casually over the sound of the running water. He found an entry-level property outside of Eugene. 4 acres completely shielded by a mountain ridge. No towers for 12 miles. The soil report is clean. My stomach dropped. We have a mortgage here, Sissa. I have a job. My clients are all local. Your clients are numbers on a screen, she said, not looking back. You can do that from anywhere with a hardwired landline. If you care about this family, you'll start packing the garage this weekend. She didn't wait for my response. She just kept washing the kale, leaf by leaf, checking the undersides for insects with a small magnifying glass she keeps by the sink. I went up to my home office and locked the door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type my password into my desktop computer, the only machine in the house she allows because it's connected via a 50-foot shielded Ethernet cable that snakes through the floorboard. 2 days passed like that. Leo and I developed a system. Every afternoon when she took her forced 2-hour meditation nap in the basement, where she claims the Earth's crust provides the best natural grounding against ambient noise, Leo and I would slip out to the shed. We bought the soldering iron from an independent hobby shop 30 miles away, paying in cash so it wouldn't show up on our joint bank statement. Leo worked like a demon. He rebuilt the power board, resoldered the tiny leads to the microcontroller, and even managed to get the small ultrasonic distance sensors aligned. But on Thursday, we hit a wall. I need to test the telemetry, he said, looking up from the bench. He had the rover hooked up to an old bulky laptop I had smuggled out from my office storage, an old ThinkPad that still had an internal Bluetooth module. The navigation script relies on a real-time feedback loop. It sends coordinate data back to the terminal via Bluetooth. Can you do it over a wire? I asked, leaning over his shoulder. Only for static calibration, he said, his face falling. If the cable is dragging behind it, the weight pulls the rear axle to the left. The orientation values get completely messed up. It has to run free. He was right. The whole point of an autonomous rover is that it moves on its own, navigating obstacles by calculating its own position. To see if his code actually worked, he had to turn the internal Bluetooth chip on. Do it, I said. Just do it quickly. He clicked the icon on the old laptop screen. The little blue light on the rover's chassis started blinking, a tiny rhythmic flash that seemed incredibly bright in the dim light of the shed. The laptop picked up the signal. A stream of green text started scrolling down the black terminal window. It's working, Leo whispered, a massive grin breaking across his face for the first time in months. Look at the gyro data. It's holding steady at 0.03. The rover's small rubber wheels gave a short, sharp spin as the program initialized. Then, the shed door clicked. It didn't swing open. The latch was old and stuck on the frame, but the handle turned completely down. Leo's face went dead white. He instantly slammed the laptop screen shut, but the little blue light on the rover's chassis kept blinking through the cracks in the tarp. I threw my weight against the door from the inside, holding the bolt in place with my palm. Who's out there? I called out, trying to sound like I was just looking for a tool. There was no answer for a long 5 seconds. Then, Sarah's voice came through the thick cedar wood, muffled but perfectly clear. The main circuit breaker for the kitchen tripped, she said. I went to check the outside panel, but the lock is rusted. Are you using the heavy power tools in there? Just fixing the lawnmower deck. I lied, my voice cracking slightly. The blade was warped. I'm using the grinder. I'll be out in a second. The current feels heavy, she said. I can feel the resonance in the kitchen floorboard. It's making my teeth ache. Turn it off. I'm turning it off now, I said. We heard her footsteps retreat down the gravel path, slow and deliberate. Leo didn't move for 2 minutes. He sat there, his hands frozen over the closed laptop, staring at the door like a soldier in a trench. When he finally looked up at me, the brief flash of excitement from his successful test was completely gone, replaced by that heavy old man exhaustion that should never belong to a 13-year-old kid. She's going to find it, he said softly. She's going to come in here when we're at work or school. She always does. She won't, I said, though I didn't believe it myself. We'll be smarter about it. The next morning, a certified letter arrived from my father-in-law's legal representatives in Portland. It wasn't a formal custody filing yet. It was an intent to review child welfare environment, signed by a family law attorney whose name I recognized from the city's top-tier listings. The letter noted that due to documented medical non-compliance by the father regarding the child's diagnosed environmental sensitivities, the maternal family was preparing a formal petition for temporary residential relocation to ensure the minor's physical safety. They had the medical paperwork from her holistic doctor attached. It looked official. It had terms like chronic neuroinflammatory response due to technological proximity, written in neat, cold type. I stood in the hallway, holding the heavy linen paper, realizing she hadn't just been washing kale and talking about Oregon. She had been building her case while I was hiding in a shed with a soldering iron. When I looked up, Sarah was standing at the top of the stairs, looking down at me with that same calm, terrifying smile. Did you read it? She asked. This is fraud, Sarah, I said, my voice shaking as I held up the pages. This doctor doesn't even have a license from the state medical board. He's an acupuncturist who took an online course in environmental toxicology. He understands what the system ignores, she said, descending the stairs slowly, her bare feet making no sound on the wood. And my father's attorneys know exactly how to present it to a judge. You have until Tuesday to sign the listing agreement for the house. We move together as a family, or I take him and you can try explaining your wires and your signals to a family court judge who doesn't care about your accounting client. She walked past me into the kitchen, leaving me alone in the hall with the letter. That evening, Leo didn't come down for dinner. I brought a bowl of brown rice and steamed greens up to his room, the only food Sarah allows in the house now. But when I opened the door, his room was empty. The window facing the backyard was unlatched, the thin linen curtain blowing softly in the cool night air. My heart stopped. I dropped the bowl. It didn't break, but the dry rice scattered across the hardwood floor like like small teeth. I ran out the back door without my shoes, my socks soaking through instantly on the wet grass. The shed door was wide open, the small interior yellow bulb swinging gently from its cord in the breeze. Leo was sitting on the concrete floor, his back against the workbench. The blue tote was pulled out from under the tarp, and the rover was sitting between his knees. He had the old laptop open on his lap, the screen casting a pale gray glow over his face. The blue light on the rover wasn't blinking anymore. It was solid. "Leo," I breathed, stepping inside and pulling the door shut behind me. "What are you doing?" "She's awake. She's upstairs." He didn't look up. He had a pair of wire cutters in his right hand. He was holding the main power lead to the microcontroller. The thick, insulated red wire he'd spent 3 days carefully sawing back into place. "She found my notebook," he said. His voice was completely empty. "She went through my school bag while we were downstairs. She found the drawings for the new chassis design. She burned them in the wood stove." I looked toward the main house. The small stone chimney on the side of the living room was releasing a thin wisp of gray smoke into the night sky. "She told me that every time I think about these things, I'm letting the poison win," Leo whispered. He looked down at the small aluminum machine between his knees. "She said if I don't stop, she's going to make sure I never go back to any school at all. That we're going to live in the cabin where there are no other kids to corrupt me." He raised the wire cutters. The metal jaws opened, slipping around the red wire. "Leo, don't," I said, taking a step forward. "We can fix this. I can hire a lawyer. I can talk to your grandfather." "You won't," he said. He didn't say it with anger. It was just a statement of fact from a kid who had watched his father apologize for 5 years straight just to keep the peace. "You're afraid of them. You always have been." His thumb tightened on the handle of the cutter. The metal clicked against the copper wire inside the insulation, but he didn't squeeze down all the way yet. He just held it there, waiting, looking up at me to see if I was actually going to do something, or if I was just going to tell him another lie to make myself feel better. I stepped forward and wrapped my hand over his. The metal of the cutters was cold. I didn't try to pry them away violently. I just squeezed his knuckles until the pressure on the handles loosened, and then I slid the tool out of his grip. "I'm not signing the listing agreement," I said. My voice was steady, steadier than it had been in years. "I'm not letting her take you to a cabin, and I'm not letting her take away the only thing that makes you happy." Leo looked at his lap. "She has her dad's lawyers. You said it yourself." "I said they were expensive," I corrected him, putting the wire cutters in my pocket. "I didn't say they were invincible. But we have to be smart, Leo. If she finds this rover, if she catches us fighting back before we're ready, she'll execute that emergency order before I can stop her." I packed up the rover myself. I wrapped it tightly in the tarp, wedged it behind a stack of rotting cedar planks in the corner of the shed, and piled 2 heavy bags of organic compost in front of it. It would take her 10 minutes of digging through dirt and spiders to find it. I walked him back up to his room. When we passed the master bedroom, the door was shut, but I could hear the faint rhythmic chanting coming from a small cassette player, analog, of course, that she used for her grounding exercises. The next morning, a Friday, I didn't go to my office. I told Sarah I had a breakfast meeting with a corporate tax client. Instead, I drove to a branch of my bank 3 towns over. I had an old IRA from before we got married, a small account I hadn't rolled over into our joint investment. It had about $25,000 in it. The penalty for early withdrawal was brutal, but I didn't care. I sat in a cubicle with a junior loan officer, signed a stack of digital forms, and had the funds wired into a new individual checking account under my name only. It felt like I was crossing a line in the sand. There was no going back to the exhausted apologies now. At 11 o'clock, I walked into the offices of Marcus & Webb, a mid-sized family law firm in the city. I had found them through a divorced client who swore the lead partner was a shark. I sat in a conference room that smelled of stale coffee and leather cleaner, waiting for David Marcus. When he walked in, he wasn't what I expected. He was in his late 50s, tired-looking, wearing a slightly rumpled suit. He sat down, opened a yellow legal pad, and asked me to start from the beginning. I told him everything: the battery ban, the scout trip, the laundry detergent, the meter she used to scan the walls. I showed him the certified letter from my father-in-law's attorneys and a copy of the holistic practitioner's medical directive. I told him about the shed and the look in my son's eyes when he was about to cut the wire. Marcus didn't interrupt. He just took note. When I finished, he put his pen down and looked at me. "It's a tough hill to climb," he said bluntly. "Family courts lean heavily toward maintaining the status quo, and unfortunately, holistic parenting isn't a crime. Unless a child is in immediate physical danger, judges hesitate to strip custody from a mother who claims she's acting in the child's health interest. She's isolating him," I argued, leaning forward. "She pulled him out of school based on a fake medical document. She's talking about moving him off-grid to escape 5G. "I hear you," Marcus said, tapping the fake medical directive. "But this is your golden ticket right here. This isn't just a difference in parenting styles. This is educational interference and medical fabrication. Her father's firm is banking on the fact that you won't have the stomach or the wallet to call their bluff. They sent this intent to review to scare you into signing the house over." "It almost worked," I admitted. "We need to file first," Marcus said, leaning in. "Monday morning, we file a petition for temporary exclusive custody and an injunction preventing her from relocating the child. We use her own fraudulent medical document against her. We subpoena this holistic doctor to explain his diagnostic criteria for electromagnetic hypersensitivity in front of a judge. These fringe guys fold the second they're under oath because they know it's garbage. Her family will bury us in paperwork." "Let them," he said. "I charge $400 an hour. I need a $10,000 retainer by close of business today." I wrote the check from my new account right there in the conference room. When I got home at 4 o'clock, the house was eerily silent. The refrigerator wasn't humming. humming. The digital clock on the oven was black. I walked into the living room and found Sarah sitting on the floor in the center of the rug, surrounded by lit beeswax candles. "The power is out," I said, dropping my keys on the console table. "I had the utility company disconnected at the pole," she said. She didn't open her eyes. The ambient radiation was spiking. I could feel it in my lymph node. "We don't need it for the weekend. We'll be packing anyway." I stared at her. She had actually called the utility company. She was plunging us into darkness just to prove a point. "Where is Leo?" I asked, my heart suddenly hammering. "He's in the basement," she said calmly. I cleared out a space for him next to the foundation. It's the only place in the house where the earth blocks the signals. I took his mattress down there. The springs in his bed frame were acting as antennas. I didn't say a word. I just turned and sprinted toward the basement door. I yanked it open and pounded down the wooden stairs in the dark. It was freezing down there. The only light came from a tiny sliver of late afternoon sun filtering through a dusty egress window. In the far corner on the bare concrete floor lay Leo's mattress. Leo was sitting on it, wearing a heavy wool sweater, his knees pulled up to his chest. He was staring blankly at the cinderblock wall. Next to him was a small battery-free wind-up lantern that cast a pathetic dim yellow glow. "Leo," I said, dropping to my knees next to him. He didn't look at me. "She threw away my shoes," he whispered. "She said the rubber soles were synthetic and were trapping the bad energy inside my body. I can't leave." I looked around the dark, damp basement. She was treating him like a biohazard in his own home. The absurdity of it, the sheer, crushing delusion of what she believed she was saving him from, hit me like a physical blow. She wasn't protecting him. She was burying him alive. "Get up," I said. "I don't have shoes," he repeated, his voice hollow. "I don't care," I said, grabbing his arm and pulling him to his feet. "You can wear my boot. You can walk barefoot to the car. We are leaving." Right now, he looked at me, a flicker of something resembling hope, or maybe just shock, crossing his face. "Where are we going?" "To a hotel," I said. "A brightly lit hotel with a television and Wi-Fi and a microwave. And then, we're going to court." We walked up the stairs together. When we reached the kitchen, Sarah was standing there, blocking the hallway to the front door. She had blown out the candles. The house was dimming rapidly as the sun set. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice sharp. The calm, enlightened guru facade was gone. This was the raw, panic need for control. "He cannot go outside. The neighborhood is flooded with frequencies right now. He needs to ground himself." "He's not a radio, Sarah," I said, walking straight toward her, pushing Leo slightly behind me. "He's a teenage boy, and you are suffocating him." "I am saving him," she screamed, taking a step toward me. "You are weak. You'd rather he get sick than deal with a little discomfort." "I'm not doing this anymore," I said, keeping my voice low. "I'm not humoring the paranoia. The medical document is fake. Your dad's threats don't scare me anymore. We're leaving, and if you try to stop us, I will call the police and tell them you've trapped a minor in a basement with no electricity." She froze. The mention of the police, of outside authorities who wouldn't care about her holistic theories or her father's money, seemed to short-circuit her brain for a second. I didn't wait for her to recover. I pushed past her, guiding Leo by the shoulder. We walked out the front door, down the driveway, and got into my car. I locked the doors and started the engine. As I backed out into the street, I looked at the house. Sarah was standing in the open doorway, a dark silhouette against the unlit hallway. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't running after us. She just stood there, completely still, watching us pull away. I drove for 20 minutes in total silence. Leo sat in the passenger seat, his stocking feet tucked under the heater vent. The dashboard light bathed his face in a soft electronic glow. "Are we really going to a hotel?" he asked finally. "Yes," I said. "Will it have internet?" "It will have the fastest internet in the city," I promised. He let out a long, shaky breath and leaned his head against the cold glass of the window. We checked into a mid-range business tel near the highway. I paid for 3 nights in advance. When we got to the room, the first thing Leo did was turn on every single lamp. Then he grabbed the remote and turned on the television, not even caring what channel it was on, just soaking in the noise and the light and the normality of it all. I sat on the edge of my bed and pulled out my phone. It was completely dead. I realized I had left my charger at the house, plugged into the wall before Sarah had the power cut. I used the hotel room's landline to call the front desk and ask for a spare charger. When I finally got my phone plugged in and turned on, it exploded with notifications. 16 missed calls, all from Sarah's father, 3 voicemails from his law firm, and 1 text message from Sarah sent 10 minutes after we left. "You made your choice. The house is locked. If you try to come back, you will be trespassing. I have already contacted the authorities about your reckless endangerment of a medically fragile child. My father's team is filing the emergency order tonight." I stared at the glowing screen. The battle hadn't been avoided. I had just fired the first shot. I looked over at Leo, who was sitting on the carpeted floor, staring at a sitcom he probably didn't even find funny, looking more relaxed than I had seen him in 5 years. It was going to be ugly. It was going to drain every cent I had, and it was going to drag all our private misery into a public courtroom. The phone in my hand vibrated. It was David Marcus. "I hope you're sitting down." My lawyer's voice came through the speaker, crisp and urgent. "I just got a call from an opposing counsel. Not the local guys. A partner at the firm in Portland." "I know," I said, rubbing my eyes. "She told them we left." "That's not why they called," Marcus said. "They didn't file an emergency order for custody. They filed for a restraining order. She's claiming you physically assaulted her when you took the boy." I stopped breathing. I actually felt my lungs lock up. I looked over at Leo. He was sitting cross-legged on the floral hotel bedspread, completely captivated by a rerun of a cooking show. He was safe. He was quiet. "I didn't touch her," I said. My voice sounded thin, like it was coming from someone else. I pushed past her in the hallway. I didn't hit her. I didn't even grab her arm. My hands were on Leo. "It doesn't matter what actually happened," Marcus said, his voice dropping into that cold clinical register gangster lawyers use when things go completely sideways. It matters what she told the intake clerk at the courthouse. She said you violently forced your way out, grabbed the child, and caused her physical harm. In family court, an allegation of domestic violence is a nuclear bomb. It immediately shifts the burden of proof onto you. Can she just do that? I asked, gripping the plastic hotel phone so hard my knuckles turned white. Just lie? People lie in family court every day, Marcus said flatly. Her father's firm drafted the affidavit. They know exactly what language triggers an automatic temporary injunction. The judge hasn't signed it yet. It's late Friday, and the duty judge's backed up, but they will sign it by Monday morning. When they do, you will be legally barred from contacting her, returning to the marital home, or having custody of your son. I looked at Leo. He was smiling at the television. It was a small, genuine smile. I hadn't seen him do that in months. If the order goes through, what happens to Leo? The police will be dispatched to serve you, Marcus said. If the child is with you, they will remove him and return him to the mother. That is standard procedure. My stomach dropped into a bottomless pit. No, Marcus. If they take him back to that dark house, she'll lock him in the basement again. She'll take him to Oregon. I can't let that happen. Then we have to beat them to the courthouse on Monday, Marcus said. I am drafting an emergency counter petition right now. We are going to allege severe psychological abuse, medical neglect, and false imprisonment. But you need to listen to me very carefully. Where are you right now? A La Quinta off Interstate 84. Do you use a credit card to pay for the room? No, I said, my heart hammering. I used the cash I pulled from the bank this morning. Good. Keep it that way. Turn off your phone's location services. Do not log into your shared bank account. Do not respond to her text. If they can't find you this weekend, they can't serve you. You need to stay invisible until Monday morning at 8 a.m. when we walk into the courthouse together and file our motion first. Invisible, I repeated. Right. Keep the boy calm. Document everything he says about his living conditions at the house. I will see you Monday. He hung up. I stood by the window for a long time, looking out at the highway traffic blurring past in the dark. I was a 38-year-old accountant with a clean record, and I was suddenly a fugitive in my own city, hiding my son from a billionaire's legal team. I walked over to the desk, opened my laptop, and connected to the hotel Wi-Fi. I needed to check my work email to make sure I had cleared my schedule for Monday. The second my inbox refreshed, my stomach bottomed out again. There were 4 urgent emails from my managing partner, Richard. The subject line on the most recent one read, "Urgent, loss of account, call me immediately." I clicked it open. We just received formal notice from Arthur Vance's holding company. They are terminating all contracts with our firm, effective immediately. They cited unresolved ethical concerns regarding the primary account manager, which is you. This is a multi-million-dollar account. What the hell is going on? Call my cell the minute you read this, Arthur Vance, my father-in-law. He hadn't just filed a restraining order. He was actively trying to bankrupt me. He knew that his holding company made up 30% of my firm's billable hours. He was leveraging his immense wealth to strip away my livelihood so I couldn't afford to fight him in court. He was making me radioactive. I closed the laptop slowly. The $25,000 I had transferred into my private account suddenly felt like pocket change. Marcus charged $400 an hour. A drawn-out custody battle against a top-tier Portland firm could cost $100 grand easily. Arthur was choking out my supply line before the war even officially started. Dad? I turned around. Leo was sitting up on the bed, looking at me. Yeah, buddy. What's up? Are we ordering pizza? He asked. Mom said the cheese has bovine growth hormones that cause early onset dementia, but I kind of really want pizza. I forced a smile, swallowing down the sheer terror of what was happening to my life. Yeah, we're getting pizza. Extra cheese. I ordered a large pepperoni using the hotel room phone and paid the delivery guy in cash. We sat on the bed, eating greasy slices off paper plates, watching a marathon of engineering documentaries on the Discovery Channel. Leo talked my ear off about tensile strength and battery optimization. He had so much stored up inside his head, so many thoughts he hadn't been allowed to speak aloud in that sterile, silent house. Every time he laughed, it felt like a tiny victory, but beneath it, all I could hear was the ticking clock. Saturday morning dragged by with agonizing slowness. I kept the curtains drawn. Every time a car door slammed in the parking lot, my heart spiked. I kept waiting for the heavy knock of a police officer, but it never came. Around noon, Leos is sitting at the small desk near the window, carefully unspooling a coil of copper wire he had salvaged from the broken power board. He was relaxed, humming quietly under his breath. My burner phone, the one I had bought with cash at a gas station that morning just so I could make outbound calls without being tracked, vibrated on the nightstand. I had only given the number to Marcus and to Mr. Harrison, Leo's robotics teacher, just in case he found any more of Leo's tools at the school. I picked it up. The caller ID was a blocked number. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? You've made a very poor miscalculation. The voice was deep, gravelly, and perfectly calm. It was Arthur. I froze. I hadn't given this number to anyone but my lawyer and a high school teacher. How did you get this number? You're a creature of habit, Arthur said slowly. You went to the Exxon station on Route 9. You used your reward card to get a discount on the prepaid phone. The transaction hit your joint email account as a digital receipt. You really aren't built for this kind of game, are you? I squeezed my eyes shut, cursing myself. The grocery store loyalty card. It was attached to my keychain. I had swiped it out of pure muscle memory. Listen to me, Arthur, I said. said, keeping my voice low so Leo wouldn't hear over the television. Your daughter is sick. She locked him in a dark basement. She cut the power to the house. My daughter is protecting her child from a toxic environment, Arthur replied smoothly, and she has the medical documentation to prove it. You, on the other hand, have a history of profound compliance, followed by a sudden, violent outburst resulting in the abduction of a minor. That is how the court is going to see it. That is how my attorneys have framed it. It's a lie and you know it. Truth is a matter of presentation, he said. I am going to make this very simple for you. You have a choice to make before Monday morning. Option A. You bring the boy back to the house today. You sign the residential relocation agreement. You walk away. I will reinstate my contract with your firm, and I will set up an aggressive trust fund for your son's future. You can visit him in Eugene on supervised weekends. I am not giving up my son. Then let me explain option B, Arthur continued, his tone never rising. If you show up at that courthouse on Monday, I will bury you. I have already contacted your managing partner. You will be fired by Tuesday. I have hired private investigators to dig through every tax return you have filed for the last 10 years. We will find a discrepancy, and we will report you to the IRS and the state licensing board. You will lose your CPA license. You will be penniless, unemployable, and tied up in litigation for the next decade. And in the end, I will still take the boy, because a judge will not grant custody to a destitute father with a history of alleged domestic violence. The hotel room felt incredibly small. The air conditioner hummed against the window. You're a monster, I whispered. I'm a father, Arthur corrected him. I protect my own. You are an obstacle. You have until 8 p.m. tomorrow to drop the boy off at the house. If you don't, I will ruin your life. The line went dead. I pulled the phone away from my ear. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped the cheap plastic device. I looked at the dark screen, the reality of his threat sinking into my bones like ice water. He wasn't bluffing. He had the money to do everything he said, and he didn't care who he destroyed in the process. Dad? I turned. Leo was standing by the desk, holding a small aluminum gear. He had heard. He hadn't heard Arthur's end of the conversation, but he had heard my tone. He had seen my face. Who was that? He asked. The light in his eyes, the spark that had returned over the last 24 hours, was flickering. The old dead compliance was trying to creep back in. Was it Grandpa? It was just a wrong number, I lied, my voice cracking. Leo looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked down at the gear in his hand. They're going to make us go back, aren't they? He said quietly. Grandpa is going to make you send me back to the basement. No, I said, stepping away from the nightstand and walking over to him. I crouched down so I was exactly at his eye level. I didn't reach out to touch his shoulder or try to hug him. He wasn't the kind of kid who wanted physical reassurance when his world was tilting. He wanted data. He wanted facts. I'm not sending you anywhere. Your grandfather is a bully, Leo. He thinks because he has a lot of money, he gets to decide how everyone else lives. But he doesn't. He sounded mad, Leo said softly, his fingers still tracing the edges of the aluminum gear. He's used to people doing exactly what he says the second he says it, I told him. And I just told him no. People like him don't know how to handle the word no. Leo processed. He looked at the gear, then over at the TV, and finally back to me. Are you going to get in trouble? I might lose my job, I said. I didn't sugarcoat it. Sarah had spent years lying to him about the world, creating invisible monsters and fake sicknesses. I wasn't going to lie to him about the real monsters. Grandpa is a big client at my firm. He's threatening to take his business away if I don't bring you back. You should bring me back, Leo said instantly. His voice didn't waver. It was a cold, pragmatic calculation. If you lose your job, you can't pay the lawyer. If you can't pay the lawyer, Mom gets the house and you go to jail. That's what she said happens to people who steal kids. Just take me back. I'll just stay in my room. Hearing a 13-year-old boy offer himself up as a sacrificial lamb to save my accounting career broke something open inside of me. The fear that Arthur Vance had just pumped into my veins evaporated, replaced by a white-hot suffocating rage. I am your father, I said, my voice thick. It is my job to take care of you. It is not your job to take care of me. You are never going back to that basement. If I have to wait tables, if I have to sell my car, if I have to dig ditches, I will do it. But you are going to finish that rover, and you are going to go to college, and you are going to have a life. I stood up before I started crying. I couldn't let him see me fall apart. Not now. I have to make a phone call, I told him, pointing to the television. Find a movie. Turn the volume up. I took the burner phone and went into the small, brightly lit hotel bathroom. I shut the door, turned on the exhaust fan to mask the sound of my voice, and sat on the edge of the bathtub. I dialed Richard's cell number from memory. He picked up on the second ring. Where the hell have you been? Richard's voice barked through the cheap speaker. He sounded out of breath like he was pacing. I've been trying your personal cell for 2 hours. Arthur Vance just ripped my head off on a conference call with 3 of the senior partners. Richard, listen to me. I started, keeping my voice as steady as I could. This is a family issue. Sarah has completely lost her grip on reality. She locked Leo in a basement without electricity. I had to get him out. Arthur is using his account with the firm to extort me into giving him back. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of traffic in the background. Richard was probably standing on the balcony of his townhouse in the city. We had worked together for 9 years. He had been to my house for barbecue. He had bought Leo a customized drafting set for his 10th birthday. I'm sorry, Richard said finally. His voice had dropped all the anger. It was just tired. I really am, man. I know Sarah has always been extreme. I always thought you had the patience of a saint for putting up with that holistic garbage. Then you understand why I can't cave to Arthur. I understand, Richard said gently, but the firm can't absorb a 30% revenue hit because of your custody battle. You know the margins we're running right now. If Arthur pulls his holding company, we have to lay off 6 junior associates by the end of the quarter. I have partners demanding your immediate termination. I closed closed my eyes. The bathroom tiles felt like ice through my sock. Are you firing me, Richard? I'm putting you on unpaid administrative leave, effective immediately, he said. The corporate speak felt like a knife twisting in my gut. Pending an internal ethics review. Arthur's legal team sent over an affidavit claiming you committed domestic violence and kidnapped your son. As long as that's floating around, our liability insurance won't even let you log into the servers. It's a fake affidavit. We're filing an injunction on Monday. Then file it, Richard said. Clear your name, sort out your family. And when the dust settles, call me. But until then, you are locked out of the system. I have to protect the firm. He hung up. I sat on the edge of the tub for a long time, staring at the grout lines between the tiles. It was brutally efficient. Arthur hadn't just threatened me. He had executed the threat within an hour. He had cut off my salary, my health insurance, and my professional reputation, all before the sun even went down on a Saturday. I stood up, splashed cold water on my face, and dried off with a stiff hotel towel. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked 10 years older than I had yesterday morning. When I walked back into the main room, Leo was watching a documentary about the Apollo 11 moon landing. He had taken his copper wire and managed to fashion a makeshift antenna for the broken power distribution board. He looked up at me, his eyes scanning my face for bad news. Everything is fine, I lied smoothly. Just taking a few days off work so we can focus on Monday. I grabbed my laptop, brought it to my bed, and opened a secure browser. I needed to see exactly how bad the damage was. If I was on unpaid leave, the $25,000 I had moved into my private account yesterday was suddenly my entire life saving. I logged into the joint checking account I shared with Sarah. The screen loaded slowly on the hotel Wi-Fi. Available balance. I stared at the screen. I refreshed the page. Available balance. I clicked on the transaction history. At 3:15 p.m. yesterday, barely an hour after I had pulled my 25 grand from the old IRA, there was a single outgoing wire transfer for $4,200. The description just read, transfer to Vanced Family Trust. She had drained it. She had taken our mortgage money, our grocery money, our utility money, and moved it into an impenetrable fortress controlled by her father. If I hadn't gone to the bank yesterday morning on a gut instinct, we wouldn't have had enough money to buy the pizza we just ate. They were systematically dismantling my life, piece by piece, trying to starve me out before I could ever reach a judge. I closed the laptop and pushed it aside. I felt sick. The walls of the La Quinta suddenly felt like a trap. If Arthur had private investigators looking into my tax history, how long until they started pinging my license plate? How long until they checked the security cameras at local hotels? Hey Leo, I said, keeping my tone light. How long does it take you to pack up the Rover? He paused his documentary. 2 minutes. Why? I think we're going to switch hotels. He didn't ask questions. He just started carefully placing his components back into the blue plastic tote. He was so conditioned to sudden irrational changes in his environment that he just adapted instantly. It broke my heart to see how efficient he was at disappearing. We left the room exactly as we found it. I didn't check out at the front desk. We just walked down the back stairs to the parking lot. The night air was cool, smelling of exhaust and wet asphalt. I threw our bags into the trunk, buckled Leo into the passenger seat, and pulled out onto the highway. I drove west for an hour, putting as much distance between us and our zip code as possible. We crossed the county line just after 10 o'clock. I found a cheap independent motel off a secondary state route. The neon sign was missing 3 letters, and the office smelled intensely of stale cigarette smoke and cheap bleach. I paid the clerk in cash for 2 nights. No name, no credit card on file. Just a fake license plate number scrawled on a paper ledger. The room was worse than the La Quinta. The carpet was sticky, and the lock on the door looked like it could be defeated by a stiff breeze. But it was completely off the grid. Nobody was finding us here. I pulled the heavy blackout curtains shut, dragging a rusted metal chair under the door handle for good measure. Leo didn't complain. He just set up his tote box on the small, scratched laminate table in the corner and pulled out his laptop. I need internet to download the compiler for the new gyro sensors, he said, staring at the motel's faded instruction card. I'll set up a hotspot on my phone, I told him. I connected the burner phone to my laptop and bridged the connection. It was agonizingly slow, but it worked. For the next 4 hours, the only sounds in the room were the hum of the ancient window air conditioner and the rapid rhythmic clicking of Leo's fingers on his keyboard. I sat on the lumpy mattress, staring at the ceiling, playing out every possible variation of Monday morning in my head. I had to get to the courthouse by 8 a.m. I had to meet Marcus. We had to file the injunction before Arthur's attorneys could process the fake domestic violence charge. It was a race, pure and simple. Sunday morning broke gray and rainy. The rain lashed against the thin window pane of the motel, turning the parking lot into a shallow, oily lake. We didn't leave the room. We ate stale crackers and drank tap water from plastic cups. I checked my burner phone every 20 minutes, waiting for a message from Marcus, but the screen stayed dark. By mid-afternoon, the claustrophobia was starting to set in. Leo had finished his code compile and was just sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at the muted television. Dad, yeah. What happens if we lose tomorrow? The question hung in the stale air between us. I wanted to give him the confident, bulletproof father answer. I wanted to tell him that good guys always win, that the truth always comes out, that the judge would see right through his mother's delusion and his grandfather's money. But I looked at him, wearing my oversized boot, eating saltines in a dingy roadside motel, hiding like a criminal, and I couldn't bring myself to feed him another platitude. If we lose tomorrow, I said quietly, she's going to take you to Oregon, and I'm going to spend every dollar I have and every day of my life fighting to get you back. Leo nodded slowly. He didn't look relieved, but he didn't look terrified either. He just looked like he finally understood the stakes. Okay. Okay, he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, heavy piece of metal. It was the custom servo motor Mr. Harrison had let him keep from the high school lab. He rolled it between his palms, the polished aluminum catching the dim light from the bedside lamp. If she takes me, Leo said, his voice dropping to a whisper, I won't stop building things, even if she takes all the tools, even if she burns the notebooks. I'll build them in my head. I'll map the circuits in my brain. She can't scan that. She can't hear the frequencies inside my head. I stared at him. The sheer resilience of it, the quiet, unbroken defiance hiding behind his flat affect, left me speechless. She hadn't broken him. She had just forced him underground. She can't, I agreed, my throat tight. She can't touch what's in your head. At 6 p.m. my burner phone buzzed. I snatched it off the nightstand. It was a text from Marcus. Courthouse opens at 8 a.m. Meet me at the side entrance on 4th Street at 7:30. I have the petition drafted. Do not be late. If her lawyers serve you before we file, the game is over. I typed back a single word. Acknowledged. I looked at the digital clock bolted to the nightstand. 14 hours. 14 hours until I either won my son's freedom or lost him forever. Get some sleep, Leo, I said, turning off the bedside lamp. We have to leave before the sun comes up. I didn't sleep a single minute. I lay on top of the covers, watching the red digital numbers on the clock over, listening to the rain slowly taper off into a heavy dripping silence. At 4:30 a.m. I got up and tapped Leo's shoulder. He was already awake. He hadn't slept much either. We packed the car in the dark. The drive back to the city was tense. We hit the morning commuter traffic on I-84, a slow crawling line of headlights cutting through the fog. Every time a police cruiser passed us in the opposite lane, my hand strangled the steering wheel. We pulled into the parking garage across from the county courthouse at 7:10 a.m. I paid cash for the daily maximum ticket. Marcus was waiting exactly where he said he would be, standing under the concrete overhang of the side entrance, holding a leather briefcase and a steaming paper cup of coffee. He looked at me, then down at Leo, who was still wearing my boot, holding his blue plastic tote box like a shield. Good, Marcus said. No pleasantries. He checked his watch. They opened the doors in 4 minutes. Here's how this plays out. I e-filed the petition at 12:01 a.m. Sunday night. It's in the system. But we need a physical signature from Judge Halpern. He's the presiding judge today. He hates ex-parte emergency motions, and he's absolutely despises wealthy firms trying to bypass the standard docket. What about the restraining order? I asked. It's sitting in the clerk's inbox, Marcus said grimly. If they get it stamped before we get to Halpern, you get served in the hallway, and the boy goes to State Protective Services until they sort it out, because I sure as hell won't let him go to Arthur. We need to be faster. The heavy glass doors unlocked with a loud electronic buzz. We went through metal detectors. I had to explain Leo's robotic parts to a bored sheriff deputy, who just waved us through after poking a pen at the aluminum chassis. We took the elevator to the 4th floor. The family court waiting area was empty, smelling of floor wax and old paper. Marcus didn't sit down. He walked straight up to the clerk's window, which was still closed with a metal grate. At exactly 8 a.m., the grate rolled up. A tired-looking woman with thick glasses sat behind the glass. Marcus slid a piece of paper under the slot. Good morning, Brenda. David Marcus. I need chambers on the emergency petition filed under Vance Miller. Docket number ends in 411. Immediate physical endangerment of a minor. Brenda typed something into her computer. I see it, David. I also see a pending request for a temporary restraining order from the opposing party. Filed Friday evening. They haven't served it, Marcus said, his voice flat and authoritative. And my client is standing right here with the minor child. Look at the utility addendum I attached to our filing. The mother voluntarily severed the main power line to the marital home on Friday afternoon and confined the child in an unheated basement to shield him from frequencies. It's 50 degrees at night. That's not a custody dispute, Brenda. That's child abuse. Get Halpern. Brenda looked at the screen, her eyes narrowing. She looked up at Leo, who was standing quietly against the wall, clutching his box. Wait here. She got up and disappeared through a heavy wooden door. We waited for 12 minutes. It felt like 12 years. Every time the elevator dinged at the end of the hall, my stomach rolled over, expecting Arthur and his legal team to step out. When the wooden door finally opened, it wasn't Brenda. It was a man in a black robe holding a stack of papers, Judge Halpern. He didn't look happy. He walked over to the glass window and looked out at us. Mr. Marcus, Halpern said through the intercom, you're alleging the mother cut the power grid to the house to protect the child from 5G? I subpoenaed the utility companies as emergency dispatch log at 6 a.m. this morning, Your Honor, Marcus said smoothly. It's on page 4. The mother requested an immediate hard disconnect at the pole, citing toxic radiation. She has a fraudulent medical directive from an unlicensed acupuncturist, which is also in the file. She isolated the child in a concrete basement without heat, light, or communication. Then he looked at Leo. Son, step up to the glass. Leo looked at me. I nodded. He walked up to the window. Did your mother take your shoes? The judge asked gently. Yes, sir, Leo said. His voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. She said the rubber soles trap bad energy. I wasn't allowed upstairs. I wasn't allowed to read my book. Halpern stared at him for a long moment. He sighed, a heavy, exhausted sound, and looked down at the papers in his hand. He pulled a pen out of his pocket and scrawled his signature across the bottom of the top page. He slid the paperwork back through the slot. I am granting temporary exclusive physical and legal custody to the father, effective immediately, Halpern said. I am denying the maternal grandfather's ex-parte restraining order as retaliatory and baseless. I am also issuing a no-contact order against the mother until she submits to a full psychological evaluation by a state-appointed physician. I grabbed the edge of the counter to keep my knees from buckling. The breath left my lungs in a massive, shuddering rush. Thank you, Your Honor, Marcus said, taking the paper. papers. As we turned away from the window, the elevator at the end of the hall dinged. The door slid open. Arthur Vance stepped out. He was wearing a $3,000 suit, his silver hair perfectly combed. Next to him was a younger, sharp-looking lawyer holding a matching leather briefcase. Arthur saw us and stopped dead in his tracks. His eyes darted from me, to Marcus, to Leo, and finally to the stamped paperwork in Marcus's hand. He knew exactly what had just happened. We beat him to the punch. "You're making a mistake," Arthur said, his voice echoing in the quiet hallway as we walked toward him. He wasn't talking to me, he was talking to Marcus. "Mr. Vance," Marcus, not breaking his stride, "I have a signed order from Judge Halpern granting my client full custody. If you, your daughter, or your private investigators come within 500 feet of my client or his son, I will have you arrested for violating a court order. And if you attempt to interfere with his employment again, I will file a tortious interference lawsuit that will tie up your holding company's asset for the next 3 years." Arthur's face flushed deep purple. He looked at me, pure venom in his eyes. "You think this is over? I will bankrupt you. You won't have a job by noon." "I don't care," I said. It was the first time I had spoken to him in person in months, and the words felt incredibly light. "Keep the job. Keep your daughter. You lost." I put my hand on Leo's shoulder and guided him past his grandfather. Arthur didn't try to stop us. He just stood there in the sterile hallway, a billionaire who had finally found something he couldn't buy. We walked out of the courthouse into the bright, cold morning air. The rain had stopped. The city was waking up, people rushing to work, coffee cups in hand, completely unaware of the absolute miracle that had just occurred in a bureaucratic office on the 4th floor. We got into the car. I sat behind the steering wheel and just breathed for a minute. I didn't have a job, was probably going to have to sell the house to pay Marcus's final bill. We were going to have to start completely over from nothing. I looked over at Leo. He had opened the blue plastic tote on his lap. He pulled out the old laptop and set it on the dashboard. Then he pulled out the small aluminum rover. "Dad," he asked, looking at the screen. "Yeah, buddy. Can we go somewhere with Wi-Fi? I need to order a new lithium battery. If I use expedited shipping, I can have this thing calibrated by Wednesday." I looked at the little metal machine. Then I looked at my son's face. The hollow, dead compliance was gone. The fear was gone. He was just a kid again, thinking about his project. "Yeah," I said, putting the car in drive and pulling out into the traffic. "We can go anywhere you want."